Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first edition of the Turnkey Trader Insider. Welcome. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick mic check, make sure everyone can hear the sound of my voice. Please type a 1 in the questions box. If you can hear the sound of my voice, make sure I'm coming through loud and clear. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, guys. All right. All right, so our aim with this class is to kind of review the week, look at any trades, and of course answer your guys' questions. So please do throw any questions out there that you have. Depending on the volume of the class, I will try to get to all of them. If I can't, you can follow up with support and I'll try to get to them there. All right, so first we'll look at our legal disclaimer here. Basically saying that since we're looking at historical examples, they do have limited value, although they are still good for educational purposes, but of course past results are not indicative of future performance. All that, I'm sure we've heard that quite a bit. All right, so let's go ahead and hop in off the bat. We got a question from Susanna asking about the difference between large volume complete and the complete template. The large volume complete template you'll want to use for a market such as the CL or the FDAX. There are a few markets where we'll have slightly different settings. I don't suspect a lot of people have been looking at the CL. It's been kind of slow and choppy. I can go ahead and pull that up real quick. So I have mine set to the large volume template, and you can see it's just very choppy. So, and since we're here, I do want to cover this. And this is kind of what we want to look for to avoid choppy market conditions. So we have down here in my direction ribbon area, this yellow line just bouncing right back and forth in this middle area between 25 and negative 25, just kind of wrapping around the zero line here. And then also I'm getting a lot of turn bars up and down around all my EMAs as well. So I like to call that the zipper pattern. Once that happens a couple times, I'm really not, I mean, you're likely not to see a trade setup occur then anyhow. So, but it is something to be aware of for when we do have trade setups in that situation. No, they might be a bit more risky. So first, I do want to cover and make sure everyone is set up correctly with their data series. So we want to make sure that our days to load are 6. And the best session template we found to use with this is the default 24/5. So those are the best settings for this particular bar type. All right, getting quite a few more people piling in. Glad to see you guys in here. So if I do have to repeat anything, we just want to make sure that everyone is up to speed. So unfortunately, this week has been a little slow, and we've been kind of in these situations where it's just this long plotting trend, and things get too extreme, and we really can't enter a trade. So it's been the same for us here. I'm sure many people are not surprised, being that it's the end of August. August is typically one of the slowest months of the year. So I do think things will pick up hopefully next week or the week after. But unfortunately, it's been that kind of week. So a few things I do want to cover. Of course, we still watch out for news. With Turnkey Trader, however, rather than 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after, just still would I wait. But in the event we have that back-to-back 9:45 and 10 a.m. news, I'll just wait until after 10:05 to trade. The markets are a little more, or the trade setups are a little more iffy if we're going to just head into morning news. So I think it's a bit more risky. So this Turnkey Trader really rewards patience, which I know is I'm sure not something everyone wants to hear in a very slow week where there haven't been many trades at all. But it's a good time to practice and just watch the charts if we don't have any other charts to watch. So I like to, or Robert, the gentleman who created the system quite a few years ago, puts it that we get paid for waiting. So this is certainly not the type of strategy where we're looking to get into many trades a day. Usually on better days we'll see maybe 2 to 3 good setups in a day on any given market. And really I like to shoot for just one good trade in a market and then be done with that market for the day. So, which is certainly possible. Not this week, but all right, so let's hop into looking at some trades. So we actually had a bounce set up in the YM. So the YM is one I haven't really been watching a ton this week as it's just been pretty slow. So we could certainly hop in this trade, but it might take a while for us to hit our profit target. It's been kind of that just slowly creeping onward. So one thing I can point out about this trade that is very important, and in this first lesson I kind of want to focus on the most a baseline conservative look at the rules. So the rules on the website are certainly fairly conservative, but they do give you a little more leeway. And as you watch the charts and get more experience, you'll kind of get a feel for your own threshold of where you like the qualifiers to be. So for instance, what I want to focus on first is extremes. So let me kind of open my direction line up, and by extremes we're really focused on our direction ribbon down in this area. So for the example of a bounce, a really prime example of a good bounce trade would be pretty similar to this one. We want to see this yellow line come from above 100. So 100 is the first extreme level, and then this 125 or 120 up here is like the top of the extreme. So, but I like to see it come up above this 100 level, and then we get our turn bar, so our yellow line starts to dip back down, and I want to see it come down and bounce off the 25, and we get this really nice bounce pattern that we'll see here. Now this is, pretty close. The strongest trades are really when it gets to that 25 or below, or if we get it come all the way down to the 0 line and bounce off. That's really the best of the best bounce setups. So when first starting out, I really feel that the bounce and trend trades give you enough opportunities. The bounce will probably be one of the most common trades, uh, that and the trend trade. So, uh, and this is just something to keep an eye on. There's certainly going to be good bounce setups where the yellow line doesn't get all the way below here when it's just been a really strong trending day. And sometimes we just have to hop in those. So, all right, excellent. So, see a couple more of you guys in here. Welcome. Feel free to throw out any questions on your initial experience with the charts. If you have any questions about setting up the charts or money management or any of that. So, now the extreme will also apply to a trend trade as well. So I like to see it come from an extreme level at least 100 or above. We'll certainly get trend trades where it doesn't come from the extreme to that will be qualified and will be good trends, but the very best ones, I like to catch it when the yellow line comes from an extreme. We get in a position where we get our trend, and I like to hit it before, or I like a trend setup before it gets to close to 120. Once it gets in that range, it's kind of pushing it, but I've certainly grabbed trend trades that have gone to that extreme. So, and then sometimes like this week with the NQ where it just the trend just goes all day and it's at extremes the whole day. I haven't taken any of those just because I've wanted to stick to my conservative set of rules and really focus on discipline and following the rules. So Terry asked if these are recorded to view later. Yes, they are recorded, and I'll try to plot these or pop these in here. If anyone hasn't been yet to the Turnkey Traders website, you can go to members.turnkeytrader.com, and you can just create a login. And then once in there, we'll see. I'll try to pop these in the video center. And we'll just create a separate tab for these, so you'll be able to access. We'll probably get to that Monday, but we will record these and have these viewable for you guys later. So really something to keep an eye on as you watch the charts is look at your extremes. So what I recommend, I find this helpful for me, is to put a couple constant lines in my direction ribbon, just at, you can just do 100, negative 100, 60, and negative 60. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but just to give you guys an idea. And you can change the colors so they're the same, so you can differentiate between the two. And then make sure we put it in the bottom panel there. And we have some additional lines, and you can change the thickness and all that, but the constant lines work fine, just so we have a frame of reference for the extreme, so we can easily tell where to catch these trades, or we know when the yellow line has been there. So very important. I really can't stress it enough, especially for the bounces. And you'll really see the strongest of the bounce setups when the line goes from 100 and then dips back below this within the between 25 and 0. And then if we're going short, we just want to reverse that. But the markets have been trending long pretty much all week, so haven't been a lot of opportunities for short trades. All right, so not a ton of action today yet, so we'll see how the market develops. Um, we are getting into a possible trend situation here on the NQ. I did come from an extreme, had a little bit of a reversal here, and then we continue on our long trend. So this one is a little questionable to me because we had this little hiccup here. But if we come down, we're likely to bounce off the 200, and that's a really good sign. I really like when the bar comes down and hits the 200 and still remains qualified. So that's a pretty strong sign, which would let me disregard this. I mean, we still did come from an extreme here. All right, so I'm sure everyone would like a little bit of covering the money management strategy. I have heard a couple times, is the 40 tick stop necessary that we have in our video? That's the one that I've seen, or we've seen in general, not just me, have the best results. Occasionally, we are going to catch a stop, and I'm sure everyone's like, I mean, a 40 tick stop in a $5 tick market is still a huge hit. No denying that. So, but it does give us a lot of wiggle room, and I've only been in a handful of trades where I get a retracement really close to my stop, and it, you're in that white knuckle situation, and then it reverses and continues on to hit your profit target. Sometimes we do get a little bit of retracement, where if we had a tighter stop, we'd be stopped out earlier. Terry, do you have a live trading room now or in the future? No solid details on that just yet. I'm sure we do plan to open one once we kind of settle, once the dust settles. I'm sure we'll get a schedule for that and have a trading room for Turnkey Trader. So I do certainly think it would be helpful for everyone. So the money management strategy that we have on the website, we have our 40 tick stop, looking for a 6 tick profit target. And then we have our option for the runner. Now, one of my favorite things about Turnkey Trader so far is that once you really get comfortable with the trades and looking at the patterns, and you can kind of see that everything's not as set in stone as the rules. Not to say that we shouldn't follow the rules, but there are several money management strategies that are effective. I know some people like to go for 8 or 9 ticks instead of 6. I like to go 6, especially on trades that are like maybe a trend trade that's a little farther than I would like to take it. Or if I feel the trade's a little bit more risky. But I shoot for a 6 tick target every time. So 8 or 9 ticks. Also work really well, and sometimes with the 8 or 9 tick profit target, you end up avoiding these where if we hit our 6 tick, say for instance we entered on this trade, just as an example for the money management strategy. So, we'd enter here, go for 6 ticks. So right about here, probably what we need to go 7 to get filled here, and then we adjust to break even, and then we get our retracement back to break even, and we're out. So, but if we go for 8 or 9, we avoid this first one, but we catch another wick anyway. But sometimes going for that 8 or 9 ticks lets us avoid this first little retracement. So I still personally like to go for 6. I have been experimenting a little bit. Scott, what is the purple dashed vertical line? Seems to be on some gold bars. I'm not really seeing a purple vertical line on here. It might be a contrast between the screens. Yeah, I don't really have any. Oh, the EMD. Hmm. That looks like the overnight to me, which is I'm not sure why it's purple, but yeah, that looks like the overnight reset. So that's all that is. Oh, Susanna, pressure increasing. What is the indication? So this is our, yeah, so I'm sure there's a couple questions about this. What we call the signal indicator around our gold bar. So we have it set up that it kind of gives us a heads up if we should look out for a trade. So you may have noticed that our trend trade, we needed to come down and touch our orange trigger line, we call it, and most of the other trades will have to cross the orange line as well because they're going to be reversal type trades. So they're going to end up traveling through the orange line, both the bracket, bounce, and also the counter, but the counter is pretty rare. But they'll all have to travel through the orange line. So our middle of the bar here kind of gives us a heads up when we've had enough of a retracement, or if we're coming from the opposite direction that we've hit an area where we should start kind of perking up our antenna and looking to see if we have a qualified trade. And there are a couple other triangles here. This gray one will simply tell us the lowest or highest point, depending on which direction the market's moving, that the market has moved. And our red and green triangles will appear, so they'll simply tell us, so since we're currently going long, if the market reverses and it hits, say we haven't been watching this chart, and we glance over and see that we're hitting our red triangle, it'll pop up and say check for reversal or check for trend. So it's not going to tell you to check for a specific type of trade, but when it says check for a reversal, we want to look for a bounce, bracket, or counter trade. And if it says check for trend, we want to simply check for a trend trade. So kind of a heads up indicator. I think it's very good when first starting out. But I found that once I spent enough chart time with it, it wasn't really necessary for me to look at that to identify the patterns, but still can be helpful. One thing I will point out, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in one of the training videos. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find a good example here. Do we have any examples? Unfortunately, I can't find a good example of what I want to show you guys. But occasionally you may notice that the boxes here don't extend from DPI to DPI. I'm sure you guys have noticed that, right? And what we want to look out for in that case is if the length of the bar exceeds that box, or the range of that box, that is what will tell us if we're going to get a black dot in this bracket panel in our Turnkey Trader brackets, and that will immediately disqualify a trend trade. So if we're looking for a trend trade and say the bottom of our red box is at this level, well, our bar is already extended past that, we know the trend trade is disqualified immediately. So there is quite a bit of information to use in our signal indicator, mainly for disqualifying trend trades. And once you really get accustomed to the patterns of the bounce trade and the bracket trade, you probably won't need to rely on it as much, but it is extremely helpful. So, and then of course we have our the trade marker, which is a really, really helpful tool when first starting out. Unfortunately, it cannot give us the heads up of when a trade is qualified, and that's just due to the nature of some of the indicators that it checks that don't update live, and anytime we try to code them to update live, we get a ton of problems. So it is a very helpful confirmation, and it is set to a fairly conservative setting. So there may be some trades where if you're a little looser or not so strict with the rules, you may enter those and it might not show up on the trade marker. So something to keep in mind. The trade marker does look for the yellow line to come from extremes and for it to be in the correct, or the yellow line to come from extremes and for it to be in the correct range. So all right, we're about halfway through, so keep the questions coming. We want to make sure to get you guys up to speed. So Susanna mentions, I'm using simulated live trade entry only limit and unable to locate stop limit order to enter. Okay, so if you're on NinjaTrader, give me a second, in the DOM, you can enter a stop limit order by clicking on your mouse wheel. So if you have a scrolling mouse wheel, which you should, most mouses come with that, it's pretty standard. If you're on the DOM, you can push in the mouse wheel like a button, and it will enter a stop limit order. And if you're using ChartTrader, yeah, because that's their default setting in the DOM. By clicking the mouse wheel, that's what puts in the stop limit order. So there is a way to change it. I'd have to fiddle with it. It's been a while since I've gone through the DOM properties to know where that exact setting is off the top of my head, but I could figure it out pretty quickly. So, but generally by default, you have the mouse wheel will put in your stop limit order. So very important. You want to make sure to use your stop limit order. We don't want to get in somewhere in here in the middle of a bar. We want to make sure to use our green DPI. That way, if the market reverses before we get filled, we're not going to catch a stop. So I was discussing the 40 tick stop earlier. I know that may be a little too wide of a stop for some people. Certainly understandable. I have been there was actually a pretty just really textbook bounce trade setup, and we all got caught with it here in the office. So I mean, this one, it's just one of those that caught us, and you know, actually should have been able to ride this one out if we put in our stop at 59.63. I actually had my stop at 59.63.25. So, and that was exactly the low of this bar, which turned into a type of continuation trade. So we will be putting out more trade setups in the future. I want to kind of give everyone a baseline to operate from. And I'm sure as you guys look at the charts, I know I've already spoken to some of you. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Susanna was pointing out this one's entry was 59.73. Yeah, the stop was at 59.63, and I had mine at 63.25. So that was the difference, that one tick. But, you know, it happens sometimes. Oh, well, lost my train of thought. That's all right. But very beautiful textbook setup, and sometimes now I wasn't as conservative as I have been. This didn't quite get down to the 25, where if I had been sticking exactly to my most conservative rules, I probably wouldn't have taken this one. But you know, the trend had just been going on, just kind of plodding along. And then we get this really nice bounce setup, and you know, I did get caught by it. That's what I was talking, more trade setups. So we will, of course, be releasing more trade setups in the future. Those will be available to you guys when we put those up on the site. And I have already spoken to some of you who have noticed other patterns, and there certainly will be. I mean, there are some things I've noticed that I really like and aren't necessarily any trade setups by any of the rules that I've learned so far. And my advice for that is just do your due diligence, you know, do some back testing, look for that type of pattern, or just keep it on the horizon, or you know, take notes as you watch the markets for our current trade setups. You know, I feel as traders we like to do that anyhow, so I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you find a setup that works for you that we don't have, great. I really love hearing that when traders or when our members send me that information. I had someone actually send me, you know, they had a printout of their Dome account performance for the day, and they had developed some trade, and it was really working well for them. So I love to see that. But as with anything, you know, you want to do your due diligence and do your back testing. Keep track of the stats for that setup for a while. Maybe take some in sim. And then the best thing to do is look at those type of setups that you're looking for that don't work out, and find out what is the common denominator between why they're losing, and that can give you a really strong way to disqualify those type of trades. Susanna's asking, with the trade marker, will I see the bounce sign prior to the entry price? Unfortunately, not. We're not able to program that due to some of the indicators just cannot be programmed to plot live. So if we can't get the value of an indicator live, it's really hard to uh, it's really hard to make those signals appear live without being able to look at some of the indicators live. So the way I like to put it, and what we're um, trying to show the trade marker as, is a training tool to confirm a trade, a qualified trade after it happens. So Susanna mentioned this is cool software, and I've been practiced since I joined. Profit $800, but when I entered, the price is not stop limit. So I need to call NinjaTrader to find out. Yeah, it might be a setting, or it might even be a mouse setting. Sometimes the mouse wheel doesn't default to the to any type of entry. So you might want to check your computer settings, or yeah, call NinjaTrader or send NinjaTrader support an email. They can help you out with setting up the DOM correctly. So, but it should be default. Push in the mouse wheel. Pretty standard. All right, so went off on a little tangent there. Something I want to point out about the money management strategy. I'll try to stick to this. The 40 tick stop I know is a little wide for some of us. I certainly don't like getting caught at 40 ticks. It can be frustrating sometimes, and I know not all of our accounts can, or a 40 tick stop isn't something we want to have to endure with a to risk for 6 ticks. So we have found that's the best one. It gives us the most amount of wiggle room to ride out some of these longer retracements that do occasionally happen. Some alternative stops, I'm sure some of you have just experimented with your own stops anyway, which is totally fine. So other alternatives, you may want to try the open of the turn bar. Should be this level here. We can check the DPI or the data box to give us that price as well. That's pretty good. And sometimes even on riskier trades anyhow, if there's a trade I want to get in, but I feel it's a little questionable, or I'm not extremely confident, or it's just a very borderline type of trade setup, I might do like a 12, 14 tick stop, which in a trend, if you go back 2 or 3 bars and the low of that bar can sometimes be a decent stop. But then we do have a higher risk of when there is a retracement of us getting stopped out. So something to keep in mind. Susanna asks, is NQ the best for us to practice on? Yeah, I do think the NQ is the best. It's been one of the better performing markets with it. The EMD as well. I know quite a few people don't really like the EMD because it's thinner volume and you get some slippage. Totally understand that. So the EMD is one of those markets you just have to kind of be more active with and watch your entries and be ready to adjust your stop. What we recommend for the EMD, or for any time you get slippage in any market, it's not only going to happen in the EMD. It can certainly happen in other markets. It just doesn't happen as often. Is just adjust your profit target accordingly. So if you get in 2 ticks late, adjust your profit target to basically the original target price. Um, just because we got filled late doesn't mean we should go for a profit target 2 ticks later. We're still looking for the uh, our original target price. So sometimes going to happen. So the EMD is definitely one you kind of have to be more active with and watch your orders, where the NQ, I'm definitely more confident in just kind of putting my order in and kind of just watching it in my peripheral vision. Mossy asks, can you have a room with live trading membership? I'm sure we will in the future. No solid date or plans on that just yet. So, but I'm sure we will be having that closer to a reality in the next month or two. And Susanna, which one do you recommend on taking the second target, the 20 ticks profit or the trailing stop? So I personally like the 20 ticks a lot, and it really depends how the markets are moving. If they're consistently trending pretty long, I'll go for the trailing stop. And the thing I like also about the trailing stop is that, you know, if you're with the trailing stop and you're trailing at the white or the orange line, if it gets to 20 ticks, you can just hop out of the trade if you're satisfied with 20 ticks. I mean, it's a pretty good profit. I think it's a good strategy when first starting out. I really like doing 2 at 6 and then 1 at 20 tick profit. So I do catch it quite a bit. And I know leaving the stop at break even, I put that in the money management because that is the most conservative. And I know some of you already know the deal and you already put your stop at -2 ticks or break even -2 or -4 or what have you, to give you a little bit of wiggle room. So certainly an option, but we just kind of want to give people a solid conservative baseline to start from, and then you can make adjustments according to your level of risk. But I like break even -2 ticks. I feel it's not too risky. If I end up getting hit, I'm not going to give up a ton of my profit. You know, I'll still have grabbed 8 ticks if I hit the original 6 tick profit target with 2 contracts. But it gives me better odds to catch a runner if there's a bit of retracement. Oftentimes we'll see the retracement come back and just hit the entry price. So having a break even at -2 can work a bit better for giving us better odds to hit that 20 tick profit target or to continue trailing with the runner. So something to keep in mind as you get more familiar. And that's really one of the things I really like about Turnkey Trader is just once you get comfortable with the trade setups and you have a really solid foundation, you know, there's a lot of leeway for kind of customization for your trading style. It's not so rigid and set in stone, although there is a very good solid baseline to start from. And I even know some that will put their break even at -6 ticks, so they'll almost zero out the value of the trade. But it does give you really good odds to catch a runner when there is one. So I don't know if we have any who trade the FDAX as well. I personally really like the FDAX with Turnkey Trader. I know it can be a bit steep. It is $12.50 a tick, and a 40 tick stop in a $12.50 per tick market is nothing to sneeze at. So I know some of you who are looking at the FDAX. I would set this similar to the CL. and we want to set the value here to 2. So if you do trade the FDAX or the CL, we want to set our period value to 2. So it works out a bit better. You're not going to see a ton of trades, but they do end up being pretty qualified. So we have a nice bounce here that happened this morning. Pretty textbook. Came from an extreme right off the 0 line. Didn't go too far, but again, you're in a 1250 a tick market, so you don't need it to go too far. And there were a couple bounces earlier as well. So also a pretty good market if you're already trading the FDAX. Check it out. I really like it. Might be a good market to look at while our markets are still kind of slow. So some other things to point out when we're heading into the higher low of the day. I'm a little more cautious unless it's been a kind of strong trend and we just maybe had a bounce setup heading into the high or low. But I definitely want to, look for extremes. And heading into the high, I might use a tighter stop as well. So I'm just a little more cautious. Susanna asks, can you go through the NQ setup parameter again? It'll just be the standard setup. So this is with pretty much any markets other than the FDAX or CL or some of the other future currencies like 6E or 6B. I'd set those just like the FDAX. But we can just select our Turnkey Trader bars. And then with any charts you're going to look at with Turnkey Trader, you want to make sure we have days to load 6 and the default 24/5 session template. And then we'll just use the Turnkey Trader complete template. So the large volume template is for CL or FDAX or a market like that. But the standard template and bar setting will work for the majority of the other markets we look at. So the RTY is also, or the Russell, it's also a pretty good market with Turnkey. There was a decent bounce here, and as we can see, this one didn't quite come down to the 0 line. So it was a little more questionable. We did catch some retracements here as we headed into the high of the day. So a little questionable. May have wanted to have a bit of a tighter stop on this one. But it did go on to hit profit target and looks like it got stopped out at break even. I know most of you are probably on the RTY since it switched to CME, so they're both pretty much the same, but a lot of volume is, or the RTY is starting to get a lot more volume now. So Susanna asked, the color gray in the direction ribbon, what does that color mean? That just means that it's gone flat. So we'll notice it turns green as it rises. So if I can just spread it out a bit more. We can see that as the value keeps rising, it will turn green. And then when it flattens off, it turns gray. And then if the value is less than the previous value, it'll be red. So it'll usually just flatten out once we hit an extreme. And the trend's just been going on so long here that we're just flatlined. And at that point, it's too risky to enter some of these trend trades. So even though we may have a technically qualified trend trade, at a certain point, we're basically chasing the trend. So, it has to end at some point. Usually it does. The last days have been just kind of this constant, endless uptrend. So I don't expect that to last for much longer, but it certainly could. I don't know the future, so but at some point it does become too risky because it's going to end and we might hop in that one qualifying trend where it's been at an extreme. We wouldn't normally end it or enter it, and we're asking, well, it's going to just keep going on and on and on, and then you hop in the trend, and it'll go against us. Well, we shouldn't have entered that in the first place because we don't want to enter a trend once we're past this extreme level, certainly. I even limit mine to about 115, 110, depending on how long that trend has been going on. So all right, everyone. We've been on for about 50 minutes, so I'm going to leave. We'll leave it open for a few more questions. I do need to sign off and start another training here in the next few minutes. But we will be back next week, of course, same time. So as you use the system for the next week, do make a note of any questions or things that pop up that you would like to ask during the class. And you can certainly send an email to support and we'll get those questions answered for you. But it is also helpful for a lot of other members to hear some of the questions because not everyone's at the same level, and you could ask a question that someone's not even there yet and it just jumps them forward a lot in their skill level. So Scott is asking, what are the green, yellow, and red dashed lines on the chart? Yeah, so this is just high of the day. This is the open. The orange dashed one is the open, and then this is the low. So that's in the indicators. We'll probably add that to the template by default in the future. That one's just current day OHL. So if you right-click on your chart, go to your indicators menu, and current day OHL. Susanna mentions I made 160 NQ using the ATM break-even tick while listening. Break-even plus 20 ticks. Awesome, glad to hear it. Live trading session. Mossy, yeah, as we get that better developed, we'll probably be releasing some information in the next couple months. Once we settle, we've been pretty busy here, but it is something we definitely plan on doing in the future. Ed, when did you start? I thought it was at 12 Eastern. Will there be a recording? I apologize about that. I'll make sure the time is correct on the email. But there will be a recording for you to review. I'll try to get that up by the end of the day. I'll go ahead and show you. So if you haven't already created a login at Turnkey Trader, you go to members.turnkeytrader.com. Just go ahead and create a login, and then I'll try to get this up in the video center before the end of the day for you guys so you can review it over the weekend. So do apologize about that, Ed. I did make sure to record it. And then we'll get that corrected so you get the email in the future. Robert, glad to see you in the class. Asked, please start at noon Eastern on future sessions. I will certainly try. We do have a conflicting webinar, so we might have to adjust the times a bit, but I do want to make sure everyone can hop in the class, so we'll see what we can do there. Excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Again, feel free to leave some feedback. Send your questions or feedback to support@turnkeytrader.com. We'll be happy to answer those. Susanna's asking to lease or buy NinjaTrader. That's really, I can't really make recommendations on that, unfortunately. lease may be a good option to start. That way you don't have to fully commit. If you plan to just use NinjaTrader, and definitely you can probably save a quarter's worth of the lease price by just purchasing it outright. So again, thank you everyone for joining me. I hope you were able to pick up some things that you hadn't noticed yet watching the charts. And real quick, last one, Ed asks, have you tried the RTY? Yes, I do like the Russell, and since the RTY has picked up a lot more volume in the last week or so, it has turned out to be a pretty good market. So I'm really liking it with Turnkey Trader. That the NQ and the EMD have proven to be the best markets so far. YM's been kind of just slow and plods along and hasn't really provided a ton of entries recently. So I do hope that the markets will pick back up in September. August is typically pretty slow. I think everyone is familiar with that. And yes, we'll be the same time. If we make any time adjustments, we'll definitely send you guys an email ahead of time to let you know. So, all right, everyone, thank you again for joining me. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Hope the rest of the trading day treats you well. Until next time, happy trading.